If you've ever had that sudden sinking feeling that something in your relationship has shifted, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it, stay with me. What I'm about to explain might make years of confusion suddenly make sense. Most people believe that betrayal, or the end of a relationship, explodes like a sudden storm. They think one day everything is normal, and the next day everything collapses. But in the world of psychology, that is almost never how human behavior works. Every major emotional shift leaves footprints. There are tiny changes, subtle signals, and patterns in behavior that appear long before the truth ever comes out. The tragedy is that when we love someone deeply, our brains automatically try to protect the relationship. We rationalize. We tell ourselves she's just stressed, she's busy at work, she's distracted by family, or she's just going through a phase. But the truth is that attraction, secrecy, and emotional distance always change behavior. Always. In my work studying relationship dynamics, I've seen one specific pattern repeat itself over and over again. When a woman becomes emotionally or romantically invested somewhere else, she rarely announces it immediately. Instead, her behavior slowly shifts in ways that are designed to protect her new emotional world while managing the guilt of the old one. This creates a state of cognitive dissonance, a psychological tension that starts leaking through her daily actions. Today, we are going to walk through the 4 psychological patterns that reveal when a woman's emotional loyalty has begun to shift away. This isn't about paranoia. It's about understanding human behavior for what it really is. The first sign is something I call the dimmer switch effect. It is the exact moment when most men start doubting their own instincts because the change is so incredibly subtle. It isn't a sudden off switch where she stops talking to you overnight. Instead, her energy toward you begins to fade gradually, almost like someone is slowly turning down a dimmer switch in a room. At first, you might notice she's just a little less excited to see you when you walk through the door. The conversations that once felt like a natural flow of energy suddenly feel shorter, more mechanical, and almost scripted. When you talk about your day, she might still listen, but that spark of genuine curiosity, the follow-up questions, the eye contact, the shared laughter, it feels muted. This is where the first major psychological mistake happens. Most men assume the relationship simply needs more fuel, so they try harder. They text more frequently, they plan more elaborate dates, and they pour in more attention. But psychology teaches us something vital about the human mind. Emotional energy is like a battery. It is a finite resource. When a person becomes intrigued, fascinated, or emotionally invested in a new person or a new path, their brain automatically reallocates that energy. The battery starts charging somewhere else, and as a result, the place it used to charge begins to receive less and less of a signal. This isn't necessarily because she hates you, it's because attention is the currency of attraction, and her currency has quietly been moved to a different investment. You might find yourself sitting across from her at dinner and feeling 1,000 miles away. She is physically present, but her emotional presence is elsewhere. This creates a vacuum of warmth, and that vacuum is the first true signal that the emotional foundation has cracked. As that emotional distance grows, it almost always leads into the second sign, which is a shift from privacy to defensive secrecy. Now, let's be very clear. In any healthy relationship, privacy is essential. Everyone deserves their own thoughts, their own personal space, and conversations that belong only to them. But there is a massive psychological distinction between privacy and sudden, guarded secrecy. When emotional loyalty shifts, the brain becomes hyper-aware of protecting the new interaction. It's an instinctive, almost automatic reaction to create a protective bubble around the new source of excitement. You will see this manifest in the smallest physical habits. Her phone, which used to sit openly on the coffee table, is now suddenly face down. Notifications that used to pop up and stay there are now hidden or cleared immediately. She might start answering messages in another room or tilting the screen away when you sit next to her. Individually, these actions might seem like nothing, and she will likely tell you that you're being insecure if you mention them. But psychologists look at patterns, not isolated incidents. Behavior rarely changes without a motive. If the open door policy of your emotional life has suddenly become a locked gate, it's because there is something behind that gate that she isn't ready for you to see. This is often a form of emotional compartmentalization. She is mentally separating her life into two boxes so they don't collide. In one box is the stable, existing relationship with you. In the other is the new connection that feels high energy and validating. To keep the guilt of the second box from ruining the stability of the first, she builds walls. But those walls are made of silence, and eventually, the silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. This leads us into the third sign, which is perhaps the most confusing and painful for a partner to experience: the rise of the internal critic. You would think that if someone were drifting away or doing something wrong, they would be extra nice to cover their tracks. Some people do, but more often, the opposite happens. She may suddenly become unusually critical of you. Things about your personality that she used to find charming now seem to irritate her. Your jokes aren't funny anymore. They're annoying. Your habits, your work ethic, or even the way you breathe might start to trigger a visible frustration in her. This happens because of a psychological process called justification. When a person is emotionally investing elsewhere, they experience a massive amount of internal tension. To relieve that tension, the brain needs to make the current partner the villain. If she can convince herself that you are lazy, or that you don't understand her, or that the relationship is fundamentally flawed, then her drifting away doesn't make her a bad person. It makes her a victim of an unhappy marriage or a stagnant relationship. She begins to rewrite the history of your time together. Instead of remembering the good years, her mind hyper-focuses on your imperfections. This is a defensive mechanism designed to reduce guilt. If she can find enough faults in you, she feels justified in seeking excitement elsewhere. You might hear phrases like, "You've changed," or "We just aren't compatible anymore," even if nothing significant has actually shifted on your end. At this stage, many men fall into the trap of approval chasing. They try to fix every flaw she points out, hoping that if they become perfect, she will love them again. But you cannot fix a problem that is being manufactured to justify an exit. The final sign is the most subtle, yet the most telling: the total shift in priorities and the loss of future talk. In a thriving relationship, the future is a shared language. You talk about next summer, the house you want to buy, or even just the movie you're going to see next month. But when a woman has emotionally checked out, the future becomes a source of anxiety for her. She stops initiating plans. She becomes vague when you bring up long-term goals. Her schedule, which used to be synchronized with yours, suddenly becomes cluttered with work events, girls' nights, or hobbies that don't include you. The most telling part of this phase is the lack of conflict. While the previous stage involved criticism, this final stage is often marked by a haunting kind of peace, a cold indifference. She stops arguing because she no longer cares enough to fix anything. Fighting requires energy, and as we established, her energy has been reallocated. When she stops complaining about the things that used to bother her, it isn't because she's finally content. It's because she has already left the relationship in her mind. She is just waiting for the physical reality to catch up with her emotional one. She begins to treat your presence as an obligation rather than a priority. You become a roommate she's polite to, rather than a partner she's passionate about. Understanding these 4 signs, the dimmer switch, the guarded secrecy, the internal critic, and the shift in priorities, is not about finding reasons to accuse someone. It is about developing emotional literacy. It's about trusting that your gut feeling is actually your brain's highly sophisticated pattern recognition system telling you that the truth no longer matches the narrative you're being told. When you see these footprints, the worst thing you can do is ignore them. You cannot nice someone back into loving you if they have already decided to move their emotional energy elsewhere. Realizing that the dynamics have shifted is the first step toward reclaiming your own power. Whether the relationship can be saved or whether it's time to walk away, you cannot make a healthy decision until you stop looking at the person you want her to be and start looking at the behavior she is actually showing you. Human behavior doesn't lie. It only waits to be understood. If this analysis of the psychological shifts in relationships helped you see your situation more clearly, make sure to stay tuned. We explore the deep, often hidden mechanics of the human mind and how they dictate our closest bonds. Because the more you understand the why behind the behavior, the less likely you are to be a victim of the what. This is Lena, and I'll see you in the next deep dive into the psychology of us.